In one of my last videos, I decided to take the original Sonic game and turn it into a new 3D version. That video performed really well, and it was actually my first video to pass 1 million views, which is crazy to even think about. So I decided to do the same thing again, but this time with an even bigger and arguably better video game franchise, the original Super Mario Bros. And since the last video broke my record for 1 million views, let's try to make this the video that breaks my record for 100,000 subscribers. So, subscribe. The first thing I decided to do was figure out how I was going to make the change from 2D to 3D. When remaking Sonic, I just decided to find a model of classic Sonic online, but this time I wanted to try something different. Old games like Super Mario Bros. Were made using sprites that consisted of two-dimensional pixels. But there's actually another form of pixel art that uses the third dimension called voxels, which is basically the form that Minecraft builds take. I've seen voxel art of the old 8-bit Mario before and decided to make a game entirely in this art style. So the first step was to make a 3D version of all the 2D sprites, and... oh, this is gonna take a while, isn't it? I started with the running animation since the player will probably be seeing this the most. I grabbed 3 colors for the red, green, and yellow and started placing blocks down to make the 2D sprite. But the problem is that it's still basically 2D, so I had to figure out how to make it 3D. So I started studying existing voxel art of Mario to see how people go about making something into 3D. I don't have footage of me messing around with this stuff because it took me hours to do, and I'm starting to run low on storage space, so I'll just jump to the finished models. The body on all 3 of these models were completely different, so I had to make them from scratch. But luckily the head is exactly the same on all of them, so I could just copy and paste it over. The next step was to make a model for Mario while he's idle. Now this was a bit weird because no one is stands up sideways like the Chad meme at all times, so I had to edit it a little bit. His left arm was lower than his right arm, so I raised it up to make it symmetrical. Then all I did was take his head and rotate it the right way. And finally, the last model that I needed before moving on was Mario jumping. It was pretty much the same process as all the others, so there was really nothing new to show there. With all these models complete, I was able to start making him move around in the game. I started with the idle model and slapped on the character controller that I always use. It's a bit weird to just have him running and jumping around while he's in the idle animation, so I had to add in the other models. I made it so that when Mario performs a specific action, it'll activate the right model, and deactivate the other ones. So when Mario jumps, it changes to the jumping model, and landing will go back to normal. Then when Mario's walking, it'll start a timer to know when to switch between the 3 run cycle animations. I also made it so that Mario has the ability to run when holding the shift key. He will run faster, and the time between running animations is decreased. The next thing I wanted to do was create a little play area for Mario to run around in. I started by making a couple of textures to represent the different blocks. I ended up with 5 different textures for the ground and other types of blocks. I could then use those textures to make materials inside of Unity, and then apply them to some cubes to make the blocks that I needed. For the question block, I made a second version of the texture without the question mark so that I could put it on the top and bottom of the cube. Then I made the little test area out of the different blocks I made, but Mario couldn't interact with anything yet. Naturally, I wanted to start making Mario interact with the cubes, so I went back and looked at what happened when Mario punched the blocks in the original game. When Mario punches a question block, it immediately changes the sprite from a yellow block to a brown block to indicate that it's been hit. It also plays a little animation that makes the block jump up a little bit. Knowing this, I started working on replicating that. I made an animation using Unity's built-in animator to change the Y position of the block, which is basically just the height. Then I added a trigger below the block, and if Mario enters that trigger, the block will change materials and play the animation. The brick blocks also behave in a similar fashion. If Mario is small, hitting a brick block will make it jump up a bit, but that's it doesn't change materials. However, if Mario is big, then hitting a brick block will break it into 4 pieces. So now we have to figure out how to make Mario big. Everyone knows that grabbing a mushroom makes Mario bigger, so I started making a 2D version of the mushroom. Next I tried to figure out how to turn that into a 3D model, and finally I made it so that I could move along inside of Unity. Then I added a trigger to it so that Mario could pick it up and get bigger. And yeah, that's literally all I did. I just made it so that Mario gets bigger when he grabs the mushroom. It took me hours to make the first few models for Mario, and I didn't really feel like spending another few hours doing it all over again for a slightly taller Mario. So instead I just decided to compare the size between Mario when he's small and when he's big. The small Mario is 16 pixels tall and 12 pixels wide, and the tall Mario is 32 pixels tall and 16 pixels wide. This means that Mario gets 2 times taller and 1.33333333 times wider. I tried using these numbers to scale up Mario when he's bigger, but in my opinion it looks slightly off, kinda like skinny Mario, so I reduced it from 2 times taller to 1.6 times taller, and now it doesn't actually look that bad. Since Mario can get big now, we can continue working on the brick blocks. The old me would have just destroyed the block and called it a day, but now I finally started to learn how to use Unity's particle system, and now I can make cool effects like the cool kids on YouTube. In the original game, the block would break into 4 circular pieces, so I made an effect that breaks the block into 4 spheres since this is now a 3D game, and now it looks a lot better than just making the block disappear. Since I was in the mood for polishing up the game, I also made it so that the question blocks will shine by making the metal aspect of the material ping-pong back and forth between 1 and 0. And since I realized I didn't actually have a way of spawning mushrooms yet, I made it so that hitting the question blocks will spawn a preset item. The next thing I wanted to do was create the pipes. As always, I started with a 2D shape first, but then I realized I don't know how to make a circle using pixel art, so I had to look up how to do that. To save time, I only modeled one half of it, and then I rotated it and mirrored it to create the other half. But if I were to stay true to the original design, then that would mean having this really ugly looking black outline on the side here. It looks fine from a 2D perspective, but it doesn't look good in 3D, so I changed it to be the normal green color. And I also had to get creative when designing the top, because obviously you can't see what the top looks like from the original game. And with that, the top part is now done. I did the bottom separately because it can be used to copy and paste and make it into a taller pipe. And now with the pipe completely finished, I had to make Mario enter the pipe. Mario can enter the pipe by crouching in the original game, so I made Mario crouch by shrinking him down. Now when he crouches on top of a pipe, he gets brought to the center, faces the camera, and then I turn off collision and camera tracking to make it look like he entered the pipe. But he's actually just falling through the world. Forever. Then when Mario comes out of a pipe, I have to re-enable collisions so that he doesn't fall back through. With the pipes finished, I decided to make the bushes next, because they had the same color palette as the pipe. Unlike the pipe, the black outline actually doesn't look bad on the bushes, so I decided to keep it. And there are actually 3 different versions of the bushes, but the only difference between them is that they copied and pasted the small bush a few times to make the larger bushes. And by this point, I started to realize how much copying and pasting the original developers did when making the game. Like, watch this. Did you know that Goombas are just the exact same model as the mushroom, but just slightly modified to be able to fit their feet? Needless to say, it wasn't hard for me to edit the mushroom model to make the Goomba. I even used the same script I used to make the mushroom move to make the Goomba move. The only difference is that I had to make Goombas hurt Mario, instead of giving him a power-up. And I also quote-unquote animated the Goomba by mirroring it every few frames to make it look like it was walking. The only difficulty I had making the Goomba was trying to get Mario to stomp on it. I made a hitbox for Mario to jump on the Goomba. When Mario touches the hitbox, it's supposed to shrink the Goomba and make Mario jump a little bit. Half the time it works as intended, but the other half of the time, he misses the hitbox and hits the hurtbox instead, making him take damage. I'm still not entirely sure how hitboxes are supposed to work. But next up was making the other iconic Mario enemy, the Koopa. I realized that the Koopa was going to be a lot more complicated to make than the Goomba. This is because the Koopa actually has 2 distinct animation frames. While the shell stays constant, the head and the feet change. I tried my best converting it to a 3D model, and it looks really good, but just don't look at it straight on. When stomping on the Goomba, it turns into a shell, which will start spinning away when it's stepped on. Other than that, I reused the mushroom script once again to make the Koopa move. With the enemies finished, I think it's time to add the rest of the power-ups. The next power-up I worked on was the Fire Flower. When making the Fire Flower model, I thought about making it look like this first, but then I realized that the Fire Flower in later games doesn't actually look like that, so I changed it. The interesting thing about the Fire Flower is that it constantly changes color. I did this by simply changing the colors in Magical Voxel, and then importing the new versions into Unity to get the new materials. Then I could set it on a timer and swap between the materials every few frames. Then grabbing the Fire Flower will also give Mario the power-up, which will change his color as well. Then I modeled the Fireball and made it rotate when it's active. Then I picked a spawn point in front of Mario to shoot fireballs from, and now clicking will shoot fireballs out. These fireballs will bounce using a physics material, and will also destroy any enemies that it touches. The last power-up to add now is the Star. Like the Fire Flower, the Star will alternate colors, and like the fireballs, it'll bounce on the ground. When Mario has the Star power-up, he'll gain invincibility, and he will also change between 4 different colors, one of which is what he currently looks like. And then I had to make it so that he'll constantly destroy any enemy he comes into contact with. At this point, I was getting ready to start replicating World 1-1, but there were still a few more things that I needed to add. In World 1-1, there's a secret underground section where you can collect some coins. I modified the textures I made for the ground block and the brick block to create the bluish underground version of the blocks. And then I modeled the coins and started placing them around. In the original game, the coins don't actually spin, they just shine. But all the 3D games, and even Super Nintendo World, show that the coins spin, so I decided to just make them spin. Next I needed to show that Mario could collect the coins, so I started working on the UI. I replicated the look of the UI from the original game, using a font I got from Google Fonts. But for now, the only thing I'm going to change is the coin count. I'll save the score and timer until later in the video. The reason being is that we still need to make the iconic end of the level, the flagpole and the castle. Mario gains points at the end of the level based on how high on the flagpole he reached, and how much time he had left when he finished the level. But first I need to model the flag and the castle. The flag was pretty straightforward. It was just a sphere on top of a very long 2x2 pole. Next I made the castle by taking a brick block, making a base, and then making the top. Then I made all the little pieces on the castle that stick up, and added the yellowish outline to both the top and the bottom. And finally I made the doorway and the 2 windows. Now to make Mario grab the pole, I actually needed one more animation model, so I decided to just take the jumping model and alter it a bit so both arms and legs look like they're reaching out. Finally, I can make it so that when he grabs the pole, he'll slide down and walk inside the castle. To do this, I made sure that when the pole is grabbed, the collision on the castle is disabled, so I placed a block inside the castle that will stop Mario from completely walking through the castle. This block will be important later again when calculating the final score, but for now we need to work on the timer. The timer is weird because when it shows 400 time is left, that isn't actually 400 seconds, it's 160 seconds, because why use something that already exists and works when we could just make our own? You can figure out how much time is left by taking what the timer shows and dividing by 2.5. I don't know why, that's just how it is. With that in mind, we can figure out how to calculate how much time is left and make an accurate timer. Then we can start calculating points. Mario gains points based on each enemy he destroys. He gains more and more points for enemy destroyed if he doesn't touch the ground. This is also how he can gain infinite 1-ups. Other ways he can collect points are from the flagpole and the time remaining when finishing the level. Based on how high Mario grabs the pole, he'll gain more points. In the later games, he gets a 1-up for touching the ball on the top, but in the original, he would only get 5,000 points. Then once Mario goes inside the castle, it'll start giving him 50 points per each unit of time left. This is why the block inside is important. When Mario touches that block, the points start adding up. And now there's only one thing left to do, and that's to start making the levels. But I'm only going to be doing World 1-1 in this video. I found a picture of the outline of the level, and then used that as a basis to start creating. I placed blocks and the other stuff that I found, and first made a 2D outline. Then I stretched out the blocks to make it wider and more 3D looking. Then I started moving things around to make it have more depth than a 1 block wide level. I made a blue texture to create a skybox, and made it turn black when you enter the underground level, and the result is exactly what you're looking at now. I also started testing with other camera angles. Instead of a third-person camera like this, I tried doing an orthographic camera, like the one from Crossy Roads, but it was kind of hard to play the game this way. Ultimately, I think the best way to play this specific level would probably be the original 2D perspective, but I think this little game serves as a cool playable version of a Super Mario Bros. Diorama. As with all the other games that I remake on this channel, I won't be releasing this for obvious reasons, but I think it would be cool if Nintendo themselves made a 3D game in this style in the future. And that's pretty much all I have for this video. Alright, see ya.